let's talk about what I read for the Backlist Readathon. I wanted to vlog, but I seem incapable of vlogging. I keep really weird hours because I stay up all night and sleep all day, so vlogging just doesn't tend to happen for some reason. But I did want to do a separate wrap-up for my Backlist Readathon books because I just find that my wrap-ups at the end of the month are always way too long. So I feel like splitting the Readathon wrap-up up into a different video is just a good idea. So the first book I picked up for the readathon was Fire and Flood by Victoria Scott. So this was a book I chose for most anticipated book, or the book I was most excited about. The reason I was excited for this book is because it seemed very Hunger Games-esque in the sense that it is a battle between a bunch of children and only one person wins, and then, you know, they get some surprise, whatever. But as I started reading this, I got about 15 pages in and I kept thinking to myself, this feels so young. Like, it just felt very tween. And so I read a couple more pages and sure enough, it just felt even more tween than the last couple pages. So I shut the book for a second and then realized there's a Scholastic tag on the back. So, anyways, it definitely brought me back for a second, missing the Scholastic Book Fair, but because of that, I decided to put it down. I have nothing against middle grade or tween reads, but it's not really what I was looking for in a Hunger Games book. I may still pick it up and try it again at some other point, but for this readathon, I decided I wasn't really in the mood for this. So I put this book down, DNF'd right away, and instead I picked up Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. I mean, this was definitely the book I should have chosen for book I was most excited about, but I didn't think I'd finish it because it's, you know, kind of long. But I did. I finished it right away. So this is the second book in the Six of Crows duology. It is about Kaz Brecker and his crew of misfits who like to pull off big heists, essentially. In each of the books, actually, their heist kind of revolves around breaking out a person out of some place, and then there are some other things as well. I loved this book just as much as I loved the first one. I am a sucker for any sort of heist, but I'm also a character-driven reader, and so this duology is like the perfect series for me. One of the things Leigh Bardugo does very well is writing about the cultures and the politics of the world she creates. I also found it really interesting in the way she explores trauma as well as addiction. I found was a very big thread throughout this book in particular, as one character is addicted to gambling while the other has an addiction to a drug. So I feel like that was very well explored. It was also interesting to get to see like a loss of culture through one of the characters as well, and the type of toll that's taken on him in his life. I found that the relationships I didn't care about in book one, I loved in this book. Like, in book one, I really wasn't sold on Kaz and Inej as a couple, but they did such a good job in this book at making me just adore them as a couple. I'm actually really intrigued to see how that plays out in the show, because I feel like the inner struggle of them dealing with their own personal demons while trying to connect physically was just done so well in the book, and I'm not sure they're going to be able to capture that on film, but it was so good. The ending absolutely broke my heart, but like, I thanked it for it. I'd give this book 4.5 stars only because I very rarely give out 5 stars. It's hard for me for whatever reason, but this duology was just perfection and I love it, and I'm definitely going to read it again. The next book I picked up was The Female of the Species by Mindy Mcginnis. The Female of the Species is a book about 3 characters, but mainly it revolves around the character of Alex. Her sister was raped and murdered, and Alex decided to get revenge for that and kill the person who murdered her sister. But this isn't really something that comes out of nowhere or comes out of vengeance, because she's just all around a violent person and always has been. And then the other 2 characters that this is about is this character PK, who is the preacher's kid, who becomes best friends with Alex, and then this character Jack, who ends up dating Alex. And he's kind of like the typical high school football bro. This book. I have so many thoughts. Mindy Mcginnis' writing is absolutely beautiful. I found it very poetic. And like this book almost felt like it was written in prose because of how poetic it was. And that's where I feel like the strength of this book was in her writing. And there were definitely moments, especially near the beginning, where I was just like, wow, that is so powerful. Like it really hit to the core of how frustrating it is to be a woman sometimes, and the sexual harassment and sexual violence that women face. And honestly, just the overall judgment that women face. I also really enjoyed Alex's character as a whole because she was very morally gray. Because obviously she does some pretty extreme things, but you get where she's coming from, you get why she's angry. And then the other thing I really loved, the thing I probably liked most of all, was the female friendship between her and Picoult, because I just felt like they did female friendship so right in this book and showed like the little intricacies and like jokes and I don't know, just a female bond and this friendship, because like when there's a breakup and they have like the tiara and like there was just like very cute moments of female friendship in this that I really, really enjoyed. But that's where the goodness ends, because I don't understand how this is considered feminist. I spent so much of the book being frustrated by the way Jack's character and Branley's character are treated and talked about in the book. Branley's character overall was just like problematic in this book. She's like the popular cheerleader who used to date Jack and who's now dating one of Picoult's ex-boyfriends and whatever. But like they treated her like this villainous character just because she liked sex and she liked being sexy, but just the way that Jack treated her and the way that all the other characters thought about her was just so upsetting. Jack would continuously like think about how, oh, they used to be best friends, and he'd still love Branley like as a friend if she still acted the way she used to when they were kids. But I'm like, but he looked so down on her in her current state. And I'm like, why do you get to decide how she acts? Like, why do you get to have a say in how she acts or who she is? Like they just treated her like she wasn't a person of value just because she liked sex. Every once in a while, you would get this like tiny little glimpse into Branley as an actual human being, but then they would turn around, but then the writer would turn around 2 seconds later and like destroy all that and turn her back into this cartoonish villain character. And I'm like, nobody acts like that. I honestly hated Jack as a character. I don't understand why he was like this supposed to be this heroic love interest. I kept thinking that we were gonna get to the end of the book and Jack was gonna get called out on his bullshit. And it never happened. Like, I realized after the book was over, like, no, they actually think this character was in the right, when I never thought that for a second. There wasn't a single time where I didn't think, man, this guy's an asshole. The ending felt ridiculous and over the top, and I wasn't a huge fan of that. But I could have gotten over that fact if this at all felt like feminism. I just feel like this was not the story I was sold, because for all the talk about it being about rape culture, it does some of the worst things that rape culture does. So, not a fan, not feminist, wouldn't really recommend it. I gave it 2.5 stars. I would read it from Mindy Mcginnis again just because, like I said, I do believe that her writing was really good. I just really didn't like this book. I read this for the challenge of book you've had recommended. The next book I picked up was I Let You Go by Clare Mackintosh. I read this for the challenge of book with blue on the cover. This is a domestic thriller about a kid who gets hit by a car and they don't know who did it. There's 2 perspectives in this book. One is from the detective trying to figure the case out, and then there's a female perspective as well. I've heard about this book for a really long time because I knew it had some great crazy twist. And unfortunately, because of that, I was able to figure the twist out. I had 2 guesses in my mind as to what the twist was, and one of them was what the twist actually ended up being. But I actually DNF'd this book before I even got to the twist. The twist comes halfway through the book at around page 200. I only read to page 120, and at that point I was like, I can't do this. Because this book was so boring. I could not believe how freaking bored I was. This does not happen to me with detective books. Like, I know so many people on BookTube hate detective stories. I love them. I can't get enough of them. I'm all for that shit. But this one was so dull. I did not care about the detective's point of view whatsoever. He was the world's shittiest husband, and I was getting so sick of it. Just him being oblivious to like the way he was treating his wife was so annoying. So that was irritating to me. Everything else about his detective perspective was boring, and then the female perspective was also boring. She wasn't doing a whole lot besides just hanging out on a beach, so that wasn't interesting either. After I DNF'd it, I decided to look up what the twist was because I wanted to know. And like I said, it was something I expected, but what I will say is that had I liked this book, I would have been fine with that twist. I would have been happy about it. It wouldn't have bothered me to have guessed it because, like I said, the only reason I guessed it is because I knew there was supposed to be some crazy twist. I knew it wasn't supposed to be a normal twist, so that's the only reason it even occurred to me. So I still would have been really okay with that twist and really happy about it. But, like, you have to give me something more than that. Like, I can't just read this because a twist is coming. I need something to connect to. Either the case itself has to be interesting or the characters have to be interesting, and neither was the case here. I will say that, like, I know what the second half of the book was about, and I feel like if I could have made it to page 200, I actually would have really enjoyed that. I guess I can say right now that a lot of this book has to do with domestic violence, so trigger warning for that. I didn't get to that point, but I feel like I've always kind of wanted to read a book about domestic violence. I have, I guess, in Big Little Lies, but it's not something I come across that often, and I would like to read about it more. But I just couldn't do it. I could not slog my way through one more page of this. Like, that's how bored I was. The next book I finished was Grace by Elizabeth Scott. This is a book about a girl who has been raised to be an angel of death. It's not even necessarily a religion. It's actually more like a social protest to the religion of their state, kind of. But anyways, she's been raised for this, and she is now of age where she's supposed to do this, but she doesn't want to, and so she has to run away. This is actually really short. Like, even, I mean, looking at it, obviously it's very short. It's 200 pages, but like, even besides that, the font is pretty big. Everything's really spaced out, so I would say this is actually more like a 100-page book at most. And while I liked it, I just don't know if I got enough from it. It's a very small look into the life of this child. It's mostly just about her on this train after all these events have led her up to her having to run away from her group of people that she's grown up with. It takes a look at the two different followings and religions of this state and how they're not all that different from each other, and, you know, how choice comes into play and freedom and etc. And it was fine. It just wasn't long enough, I feel like, to really delve into the topic, so I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. I read this for shortest book on my TBR. And the last book I read for the Backlist Readathon was 19 Minutes by Jodi Picoult. This was for my most intimidating read, because obviously it's huge. This book essentially was about a fictional school shooting, where this kid comes to school and shoots, I'm not sure how many classmates, but I know 10 classmates die, and it's from a couple different perspectives, one of them being the shooter, Peter, as well as his childhood friend, Josie. It also takes place from the perspective of Josie's mom, Alex, as well as Peter's mom, whose name I can't remember. And then there's also some other perspectives, like the kid's lawyer and the police officer who was there the day this all happened, etc. I listened to this on audiobook because it was available on Scribd for free, and because this was huge and I needed a way to listen to it. I'm not really sure what to say about this book because for most of the book I just thought it was average. There wasn't anything new happening or anything really insightful that was said. I feel like a lot of the things that were done in this book are things I've seen done about school shootings in other forms of media, and I just feel like it wasn't good enough. You know, it's so easy to say, well, this kid shut up the school because he was bullied, when Well, that just doesn't really seem deep enough because lots of kids are bullied and they don't shoot up schools. And they do mention that in this book, but they never really go past that. You get kind of snippets and sneak peeks and glimpses into this kid being a little more disturbed than the average kid, but it still just feels like they go a little too easy on him. I also don't like the way they portray some of the kids who got shot. I mean, they mentioned that there were plenty of kids that didn't bully him who got shot and killed too, but some of the kids who did bully him are just painted out to be complete villains, when once again that just feels like too simple of an answer. Because yeah, okay, maybe this kid was a terrible bully, but he had to be more than that. That's not all that kid is. Even the worst kids, even the kids who are the biggest bullies, even they have more layers than that. The popular kid who got shot was really painted out to just be this horrible human being, which I feel like, once again, often is the case when we talk about school shootings in TV shows or movies or books, and once again, it just doesn't feel like a deep enough answer. Maybe it's because this book is old and was written before we had the influx of school shootings we have today. I don't know. But I will say too, like, once again, this was just feeling very average, and then the ending came, and it just felt like such a cheap shot. They do like this stupid twist of an ending that I should have known was coming, and I hated it. I understand what message they were trying to send or whatever, but it was just not good. It just cheapened the entire book, so I'm moving this down from a 3-star to a 2-star. And I really wouldn't recommend anyone read this, although I will probably try another Jodi Picoult book because most of her books interest me. This was just happened to be the first one I picked up because it was one I owned. And that was all the books I read for the Backlist Readathon. I really enjoyed this readathon. I loved that you didn't have to stick to any genre, so I hope they do this again next year because I'll definitely participate. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you'll come back again soon. Bye.